The leaders at the top need to understand the true capabilities of what can be possible with Gen AI, and they need to be using it themselves.
Sabrina Valdez, an AI strategist, helping brands rethink how teams and AI work together.
What a leader will need in the future is to be an incredible communicator with both their human and digital workers, because org charts will look vastly different even a year from now. Being able to work with AI is that you're a great communicator. Like, there are times where I literally take AI for a walk. We go for 45 minutes and we just start chatting.
Can you walk us through what you have seen that proves the most experienced operators, not the most tech savvy ones, are the ones that best positioned to lead AI adoption?
I still believe curiosity is at the forefront as to why people adopt AI. But the second component that's even more powerful than curiosity is context. And the people who have the greatest context are the people who are the oldest. So they have more life experiences, they have more work experiences.
What would you say is like the biggest difference between companies that get stuck in AI experimentation testing and the ones that actually like scale it into their operation?
So there's two pieces I'll add to that. The first is
Sabrina, super excited to speak with you. You have a really colorful history within the retail space. And so I'm really excited to kind of get to know a little bit more about what you're doing specifically with AI and different things. So just as a little bit of a background, you started, 20, let's say 20 years ago, with Walmart then you were a buyer for PetSmart. You've been promoted to director. You ran replenishments for Sprout. I mean, you've really been all over the place with your history, and you know what it's like to kind of stare down the wall of skewed data and make decisions that hit the P&L by Friday. And now you're telling retail and CPG leaders specifically that AI is not just another tool on the shelf. You said that if you were to give a TED Talk today, it would be about the future workforce being a combination of human and digital employees and how that combination will amplify human strengths, which I think is so important as we are moving to a really AI integrated world. So really to my first question here, most people in retail are still figuring out whether they should really even be using ChatGPT. What are you seeing inside the industry that made you go from running category management to telling leaders the way that you think about your workforce is about to fundamentally change?
Yes. What I'm seeing inside retail and CPG is there's this eagerness to adopt Gen AI, but they're not quite sure how to use it. And I fell in love with AI 3 years ago, before there were Super Bowl commercials, before it was popular, before most people even knew what ChatGPT was. And there are still a lot of people that aren't even using a paid version of ChatGPT or Claude. What I'm seeing is this adoption, but it's happening more organically. And I think that retail needs to think more differently about their strategic roadmap and how they're adopting AI, particularly smaller retailers and CPG companies, where they can be more nimble. They don't have as much protocol around all the different pieces that need to be kind of a check the box before they do something more broad. They can implement tools very easily into their organization where they can reap the benefits quite quickly.
I think that's a really great kind of starting point for the discussion, because I work with a lot of retailers really across industries, automotive repair shops, mom and pop, like, C stores, to even a lot of things that we might not necessarily consider just standard retail, like even looking at like service industries like spa salons.
Yeah, for sure.
And are you saying then that like generative AI and these kinds of tools, are those usable like in every single industry? Is it more like, are we thinking more like trying to focus on a specific industry in that regard, or what does that look like?
In my opinion, any business out there can benefit by having Gen AI. So I'll give you a real-time example. This week, I went to the dermatologist. I hadn't been to that particular dermatologist in 2 years. So guess what? I had to fill out forms and they were still on paper. Shocking. right? Like, and I asked the attendant, I said, well, what do you do with these? And they said, oh, well, we scan them in and put them in your chart. Then fast forward, I'm actually in the exam and I start talking to the doctor about, the firm and whatnot. And they say they have this whole research arm. So imagine a world where this dermatologist is big enough to have an entire research arm on an entirely different floor in this building. And yet they're scanning in forms where I'm checking the box on which things I have as my ailments, what's my family history. If that was in a database that could be queried when they want to go do research on a particular age group or somebody who's had a certain condition, they could get it out with Gen AI in seconds. And I think they just don't know how this works. Another example is there were a couple things that they recommended. An attendant literally walked out of the room, grabbed a piece of paper, wrote down the 3 things that I needed, and gave it back to me. So what does that do from a patient standpoint? Now I have this paper, like, floating around in my car, and what are the chances of me going following their recommendation? But if they had an app that was custom to them, and these are all the things they normally recommend, they check the 3 boxes for Sabrina and then send me a text, that is so much more applicable. So even when you're looking at complicated industries, whether it's banking or medical, there are pieces from privacy that you have to be concerned about, but there are other pieces that are not related to that. They had a whole med spa arm, and they could do plenty of stuff in the med spa space with AI without even having to worry about patient privacy. So, customers and also owners need to think differently about how they want to interact with that relationship to ensure that everybody's getting what they need from a retailer and a customer standpoint.
That's a really good point. Uh, because I kind of see two aspects in that. One is the main focus of really just like the modernization of the small business.
Absolutely.
There is, we're no longer in the 70s and the 60s where
Mhm.
everything has to be pen and paper. We can digitize a lot of this, and that makes things so much more accessible for consumers and for businesses. And I think that's a huge, huge opportunity there. And also, I think that there's kind of a second stage to that kind of modernization, which is really empowerment of the employee, of the consumer. Um, and the reason I say that is you told us the one idea that you want listeners to remember is that the oldest person in the organization has the power to be the best at AI, even though they might not think so, which I think for a lot of people seems really counterintuitive, especially with AI being the young man's game.
Yes.
So why do you believe that? Can you walk us through what you have seen that proves the most experienced operators, not the most tech savvy ones, are the ones that best positioned to lead AI adoption?
So I couldn't agree with you more. Empowerment is a thing, and you have to ensure that your team members are empowered to take on the use cases that they haven't ever considered to be helpful with AI. But the piece around age versus curiosity. So I still believe curiosity is at the forefront as to why people adopt AI, specifically Gen AI, because the curious folks are tinkering on the weekends or they're at work and they're like, hey, can this be done by AI? And that's a component. But the second component that's even more powerful than curiosity is context. And the people who have the greatest context are the people
Mm.
who are the oldest. So they have more life experiences, they have more work experiences, they have more relational experiences. And so all of those pieces, if those folks understood that they could use AI as a strategic thought partner to unfold the best strategy they've ever created their whole career, or to unlock, what it's like to deal with this particular relationship or negotiation or whatever the case may be, if they can put that in their general AI tool and start to have that conversation, they can iterate more than a young person, because the young person doesn't have those experiences. They don't know what roadblocks they hit in the most critical negotiation they've ever done in their whole career. They don't know how pieces and parts need to be considered in a strategic initiative that maybe aren't as straightforward as what are the goals, but rather the intangibles of a strategic initiative and how you have to consider change management and all the people involved and stakeholders. The older people know all those things because they've lived it, and they actually are worried about not knowing AI or not being good at it per se because they're old. That is complete contradiction to what needs to be unlocked.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I've worked with all sorts of different business owners. I know we have really for the audience that listens to this podcast, there's a range from brand new young business owners who are, fresh out of high school or even still in high school trying to run their
Wow.
business. And we also have those who, who are pushing 60s, 70s and even 80s who are, running their local shops. Um, when you were saying context, I'm really glad you followed that up with experience because I think that's really what it is. And it reminds me of like when I first started using things like ChatGPT and I would tell it very simple commands because I didn't have the experience with it to understand it. And I would get very bland, prompts and follow-ups from it. But when I started to apply the knowledge that I had, the experiences that I'd had of what I was looking for, getting more and more specific, the better the results I would get back from it. I I play tabletop role playing games with my friends every single week.
Let's hear, yeah.
It's very fun. And one of the things that we've done is like, we're playing a different game every single week. And sometimes just for that little extra push, I am like reviewing with other resources and having things like ChatGPT and those tools have been really helpful in refining some of the ideas that we're bringing to these games.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, I never would have thought I would have been able to use it in this way.
Mhm,
So, I think there's also probably a lot of people who listen to this who tried out ChatGPT, 3 years ago, post COVID, or maybe in like the peak of COVID, and it was like,
mhm.
"This is like okay." Um, the technology for it is insane. It's expanding exponentially, like, in
Absolutely.
its feature sets. So, you've helped a lot of organizations move beyond early AI experimentation into kind of scalable, repeatable systems,
Mhm.
because that's really where the value of AI is when we can actually it's not just a one-off, it's a
Correct.
recurring successful tool. Um, but for a lot of companies, especially in CPG and retail, are stuck in what feels like an endless pilot phase.
Mhm.
They're constantly having to, we're going to test a chatbot here. Maybe we'll automate this report, but it never actually becomes part of the business. I've seen this not just on small business, but on Fortune 500 level where we see it all the time in big companies. They're like, "Hey, we're an AI focused company.
Yes.
Incorporate AI." And everyone's kind of like, "Okay,
What does that mean?
well, that doesn't mean anything to me." So,
Yeah.
what would you say is like the biggest difference between companies that get stuck in AI experimentation testing and the ones that actually like scale it into their operation? Where like what is the disconnect there and what is the if you could say what it was, what is the key to unlocking that?
So there's 2 pieces I'll add to that. The first is really building it into the fabric of your organization in a way that you never thought you would build it in. So I'll give you a great example. When I cut my teeth in I was working for a startup. And it was an ed tech company who operated like a startup because that's what they were. And the way in which we shared use cases was so fluid. We had channels where we could go in and say, we had this problem and, hey, does anybody know how to fix it? And so in Slack, we could have a conversation about it. We had stand up meetings because it was a startup. So every day somebody was saying, hey, this is what I learned in AI. It was talked about in bigger, broader meetings. And it was like this team environment. So, what I encourage people from an unlock standpoint is to really get into making it a part of your everyday. So, as somebody opens their computer, just like they know how to use Microsoft Office, they know how to use Gen AI. And when you reach that level, that's the true unlock. So, when I work with companies, I have a 4-step process. The first step is discovery. So I sit down with the C suite team and understand what are their goals? What are the challenges they've currently faced with AI? Why are they engaging? What do they want to achieve from this engagement? All those things. And then I move into a formal survey of their team where we ask a lot of questions about how they're using AI with their company sanctioned tools, with tools that are not company sanctioned. What's the most strategic project that they've done? Where do they think automation can occur within their role? And what's their sentiment? Are they scared? Are they excited but concerned a little bit? We capture all of that in a very quantitative fashion. It's really helpful. And then the third component is sitting down with each functional team and doing the exact same thing I did with the C-suite and explaining, hey, I'm here to listen. We want to talk about AI adoption. Where do you think there's opportunities and that type of thing? And then all of that folds in to a 3-month roadmap, if not 6 months, depending on what the company's intending to invest, and paired with a tech stack so they have options of just beyond the general AI, what other tools make sense for their company to adopt.
Wow. Okay. So kind of a three-tiered process,
Hmm.
generally 3 months, upwards of 6 months.
Correct.
And I'm sorry, what changes kind of that length of time? Is it just the scale of the business or like the operation or
It's the willingness to adopt more tools and have additional training that takes that longer period of time because you want the training specifically to be paced so that people have time to practice. So an average training is 4 sessions if that's a single tool. So if I come in and train ChatGPT or Claude, it's 4 sessions. It always has a 1 week break, and then depending on schedules, it might have another week added into that. So you're already at 5 weeks, and all you've done is train them. You haven't done any unique business cases beyond that. So, with a 1 month head start on whatever roadmap it is, it does oftentimes extend beyond 3 months, depending on what the initiatives are for the company.
gotcha. So it sounds also like there's a little bit of like employee buy-in.
Absolutely. Change management is huge.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I definitely have been a person who has been very anti-AI in the past, and it's actually rather recently that I've been uh much more forward thinking about it.
Hmm.
And part of it was just getting my feet wet, getting my
Yes, yes.
hands into the tools and actually learning it. And I think there's probably a lot of people out there who are in a very similar boat of I don't want to do this, I don't want to deal with this. But when you take that first step into really learning about it and how to use it, it becomes such it's a force multiplier.
Oh, I love that as a force multiplier. Absolutely.
Yeah. The reality is for what you've described of a 3-month to 6-month change that could exponentially empower a business is huge. I mean, if you told any business that like within 6 months, I can guarantee you, a huge performance increase, a better reporting, more effective engagement with customers, you know, anything like that, they will take that day one. They will say, absolutely, you can do that in 6 months. Sign me up. I've been with a company who they changed uh, from like from one C suite to another, and that alone took upwards of 9 months, and still going through it. Like there's still some of the growing pains of that. So to say that to be able to nail that down into such a small time frame in the scope of big business or even small business, that's an incredible value proposition that you bring to the table.
Yes, I totally agree. And there's quick wins that can happen literally overnight. So, I talk to somebody at least once a week and I ask them, have they ever programmed a memory? And they say, what do you mean? And I'm like, okay, well, did you just jump right in and just start talking with ChatGPT or Claude? They're like, yeah,
Mhm.
that's how you do it, right? And I'm like, no,
There's so much more.
actually, if you program your memory in advance, you would be so surprised at the results that you get. So these people that One, have tried a non-paid tool and have been frustrated with the results, or two, have
Mhm.
not taken the time to program their memory. Of course, they're non-believers because they don't even know how to use the tool that they have been provided. I also take it to the next level of, here are the different levels of how you interact with Gen AI. So the first one is general chat. You're in the chat bar, you're talking about a question, maybe working on a project, whatever the case may be. Most people don't know the second level is modes. So that little plus symbol that's in that chat bar, there are modes that get you different results because you've turned on that mode. I was talking to somebody last night and he says, I didn't get the research I wanted and I was a little frustrated and citing sources I didn't, even think were right. I said, were you using web search or deep research? And he goes, no. The man had literally spent 40 years in machine learning and predictive
Oh,
analytics
wow.
and was like on the forefront on how AI in the early stages were adopted. And I'm teaching him something that he had never seen before. And then we had talked about like Claude Cowork and how that works. And I said, okay, have you spent any time? He was in like a deposition type situation. Said, have you spent any time in Claude Cowork on the legal aspect of the connectors? And do you know what skills are available and can you build a skill? He had never seen a skill built. So, the progressive levels, so we start at general chat and then we move into modes. And then from there, it's like custom GPTs, projects, gems, depending on what program you're in. And then you move into full agentic type technology. And as people are just scratching the surface because they don't know what's available to them to be utilized in an incredible way.
Yeah. You've described specifically retail as like a kind of as a greater umbrella term as an industry that is falling behind in AI usage, but really just in business in general. Definitely, I think there's a technology aspect to that,
Absolutely.
but I'm curious what you think the problem really is. Is it cultural? Is it a leadership problem? Is it a resource issue? What specifically needs to change to then break that to break the cycle with AI?
So you think about what has happened over the historic piece of all technology adoptions, and there's plenty of things cited on this. Retail has been a lagging industry, as has consumer packaged goods. And so AI is no different. If you go look at any of the charts associated with the adoption of AI, or even go back as far as like when cloud was instituted and that type of thing, you'll see that retail and CPG fall behind. I thought about this question a bit, and I think it's because at the heart of who leaders are in retail is their operators, right? Every morning you get a scorecard that says you did good or you did bad. And you just know right away. And so if your mindset is I'm an operator and any of your general AI tools is about strategy and you're trying to move past the tactical execution of using AI and move into more strategic projects and building, things that you have previously built, one on one with your computer without any type of aid, it's a hard shift into that. I think the unlock is you have to start at the top. The leaders at the top need to understand the true capabilities of what can be possible with Gen AI, and they need to be using it themselves. So, my ideal client is somebody who already has multiple leaders at the top that are champions themselves of Gen AI and have had use cases that are successful use cases that are like, oh my gosh, I have to be able to implement this into my business in a way that's helpful and I can do things differently than I have never done before.
So let's then thought experiment here. Let's say I'm an employee for a small business, and let's say it's a family shop. My dad is the one who's really running this little retail store, little tool shop.
All right. I love it.
How can I? How would you recommend talking then about AI to kind of like gear us up to for that potential shift? I mean, love my dad. He's kind of a stickler for tradition. He likes to keep things the same. Um, but I want to make sure that we are adapting with with the world, that we're keeping up with it. And especially with the way, with how tumultuous things are right
I
now,
agree.
there's a lot of really scary things going on. And as a business owner, things are looking pretty tense no matter where you are in the world. So how can I, with leaders, with friends and family, how can I kind of have some of these conversations to kind of get the ball rolling?
I mean, you used a great example earlier as a personal example where you play tabletop games. And oftentimes that's what makes it less scary for people when they say, oh, I'm planning a vacation or I have this medical question. And they get in just by happenstance because they're curious and it becomes a snowball effect. I mean, there isn't a week that goes by where I don't hear from somebody, I don't know where to start or I'm behind. Those are the two top phrases I hear. And my answer back to them is if you've ever practiced yoga, AI is like yoga, and you are in competition with you and your mat. And if you can ground yourself that your only competition is you and your mat, you can get the momentum you need to eventually reach a point where you have acceleration in AI. But if you stay in this fixed mindset of I'm behind, I can't learn it, I'm too old, it's hard, I'm not tech savvy, if all of that is in your fixed mindset instead of a growth mindset of I'm going to learn something new about AI. So my dad has his own workshop in his backyard and I call my digital workshop my workshop. So I'm always tinkering. I wake up thinking, what tool could I create for a business? Or how can I think about AI differently? Or what can I go learn? Or what's the latest thing? Or how can I surround myself with people who are learning it just as fast as me so I can be better? All of those things are there, but 3 years ago, I wasn't there, but it's because I literally have practice. I mean, last year I was in the top 1% of ChatGPT users, 800 million people. To be in the top
Wow.
1%, you're using it all the time for everything. So
I mean, I feel like you deserve a medal for that. Did you get an award or anything?
it is on my LinkedIn.
Okay. Okay.
What people didn't know is at the end of 2025,
Mhm.
if you went into ChatGPT, you got a year in review like a Spotify. And most people didn't know it was there, but when you go through it, it tells you all the different things of like what you used it for, how soon were you on it, what percent of users, all those things. What I loved was my superlative, which was most likely to automate herself out of a job, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty impressive impressive trait, being AI focused, AI yourself out of a job. That's really
Right.
impressive.
I have it on my LinkedIn post as a feature because I'm like, people should know that I'm good at what I do.
You're good at what you do, and you're really bought into it, and I think I think I would say that's a huge indicator of, like, the effectiveness of a tool. How many times do we see someone selling something, then they don't use the thing that they're selling?
Yes, I agree.
Just kind of a step back to the that question, though, what I was really hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, I was kind of hearing 2 things. One is mindset.
Mindset's so important.
It is that growth mindset. You have to want to improve. You have to want to do better. And if you don't want that, then
Mhm.
if you are happy with being where you are at, then that is where you will be.
Right.
And then the other thing that I was hearing is it's about starting small. It's about getting the ball rolling. It is that snowball effect of, if I, use ChatGPT to solve a small problem in my personal life, and I get a little bit better with it each time that I use it, I'm becoming more and more proficient. It's a training thing.
Yes,
I'm becoming
absolutely.
more and more proficient. It's expanding my potential with these tools to then continue to escalate and grow until, yeah, I can use this system to, you know, help make decisions for my Fortune 500 company. Um, it's a scaling thing, and the thing about scaling is you start at a small scale and build up.
Totally. Couldn't agree more.
Very cool. Okay, then let's kind of continue on with, from retail to more of supply chain management.
Mhm.
So specifically, you have a pretty big history in supply
I
chain
do.
and category management. You've worked across several different companies, over a decade of experience, replenishment, buying, merchandise planning, analytics. Uh, a term that I love because I just love getting to see data and such, and so I'm very excited. So those are all areas where data is everything, and especially depending on the scale, decisions are make or break. Um, when we're thinking from a small retail perspective, or really just an emerging like CPG style business or brand, with those types of businesses that are drowning in data but not really getting the value from it, where should they fit AI into their work stream to actually start to get some function and use out? What is like the highest impact starting point that you would recommend?
So this is what I love. So the difference with Gen AI is it's so accessible. So, years ago, if you were a small retailer or CPG company, you couldn't afford software that did this type of analytics. And today, even still, there are plenty of retailers or CPG companies that can't afford a Power BI or, constructing a data lake. It doesn't even have to be that complicated. What Claude can do in cowork specifically is shockingly good. I mean, the visualizations and the dashboards would blow your socks off. So right now I'm working with a client and, we're taking raw data, spreadsheets from Nielsen, IRI, and we're making dashboards without having a data lake. And it is a little bit more cumbersome, right? You got to load two Python scripts and you got to have a prompt and then suddenly you have a dashboard. But it's the alternative of you can have a pivot table or you can have graphs with a dashboard. And in minutes, you can create this, and it's not any additional cost that, a Power BI or a Tableau might be for those retailers that doesn't make sense for them at this point in time. As they grow, they can adopt those bigger tools. But at this point, there's so many things that can be unlocked with Claude. I mean, even the connectors just with an ad hoc report, something that's not repeatable, they can go in and they can use Claude Cowork, and it has its own data connector that has all these skills. There's like 13 skills in the data section of Claude Cowork. And so if they want to go and analyze, they can. The other piece is it connects directly with Excel. So, many of us have received spreadsheets where there's like 10 tabs across, and you're like, how do I interpret what's in this spreadsheet? It will walk you through. Tab one covers X, Y, and Z, and you can ask it questions about tab one, and it can go all the way to tab 10. I mean, it is crazy what is available at your fingertips, and it just takes minutes. And the thought process of how can I incorporate things differently in my workflow that I've never thought incorporating in my workflow would be necessary.
That's actually, I think, a really cool. I don't even know if you meant it. Actually, I don't know if you were aware of it. That's actually a great callback to a previous episode that we had specifically with a guy by the name of Greg, who talked a lot about using AI to his focus was specifically in using things like Claude to kind of build a clone of yourself
Oh, yes.
to help make business decisions. And I feel like that's very, very much kind of in the same lane of utilizing these tools to help interpret data and really apply the time because that's the limit that business owners have is time. Um, there's plenty of other resource issues that are going on with every business out there, but I think one of the common ones is it's a timing thing. I
Mhm.
don't have enough hours in the day to be able to make every single decision to its maximum effectiveness. And so to be able to grill down the data that they might be swamped with to actually extract some meaningful answers and statistics is such an important uh, value
Mhm.
to businesses because, again, kind of to what we've talked about, it is what actually takes them from just diddling around
Yes,
with these tools and like playing with Play-Doh to actually sculpting and creating a tool that is going to benefit them for years,
absolutely.
even decades to come.
Yeah, so that's part of my program and my offerings is creating digital clones. So recently, when I worked with this one particular brand, we wanted to stair step into custom GPTs. So we were going to build custom GPTs that were going to be enterprise wide, but we wanted people to understand how tangible and how relatable a custom GPT could be to them. So we created 75 digital clones. Everybody got their own. And it was a survey that walks through several pieces, both from a strategic standpoint and also an interpersonal standpoint. So, when you make a tough decision, are you somebody that anchors on data or on relationships? When you face conflict, what do you do in a conflicting situation? Do you, you know, meet one on one with a person? Do you send an email? And all of those things, most people don't think that ChatGPT or Claude can weigh in on. But when you create a digital clone of Keenan that knows exactly when Keenan has to think about developing something different for his role, how's his decision making? He goes through these three steps, or is he somebody who thinks about it more? And it's these 10 steps. Is he, more extroverted or introverted? How does he deal with conflict? What's important to him? What are his goals, like personally and professionally? All that's built into your digital clone. And when it's built in, your answers are phenomenal. So it's taking your memory and like amplifying it even more. So if you've built in your memory, great. But now you have this one-on-one digital clone of Keenan and how Keenan thinks in addition to his memory to run things through, run by, and you get to some incredible answers.
It's so cool when things get to kind of loop back to previous conversations that we've had on the podcast.
I
So
love it.
I really appreciate you going into that, because I think you're absolutely right. If you know if you have more people to kind of bounce ideas off of, generally that gets to, every time you bounce off, you're honing it, you're filtering it to be a more precise tool. You're sharpening it every single time.
Yeah, sharpening your tool. Absolutely.
That's a thing that people underestimate with things like ChatGPT and Claude and every, AI machine learning tool set is, it is, instead of just having, you and me just having this conversation here, it's you, me, and a million other points of input that can help grind down whatever question or thought that we have to its most precise needle point.
Mhm.
And that is unfathomable to to the everyday consumer. I mean, we're looking at 100 years ago, people were concerned about War of the Worlds, of Martians landing and attacking and using laser beams. And now we're able to, I mean, the technology expansion, all of these things going on today, it's all comes back to kind of these power multipliers that we can do so much more, so much that would be, again, unfathomable to a consumer 100, even 50 years ago, what we're able to do. 50 years ago, Star Trek was coming out, and people were blown away by the communicator,
Right.
which is a cell phone today. So, it's just incredible what we are able to do. And again, I think that's part of the value of AI, especially for retailers, because there's so much untapped potential. And I think if more people are aware of it and are willing to try it out and kind of, again, just dip your toes into it, start small, there's such huge potential benefits to the future. And we chatted about, like, what are the kind of the best starting points? Where would you apply yourself? Um, I know for a lot of people, or maybe not for a lot of people, but for definitely for some people here, there's actually, we kind of talked about it. There's some potential issues that can be encountered with using generative AI, and there's risks with everything. What would you say are the most common mistakes, especially in the retail, CPG, merchandise management side, when it comes to AI? What are the biggest, most common mistakes that people are making? And then how do we avoid that? What are the steps we can take? What are the questions we can ask, or even just, you know, perspective shifts that we can have to avoid those kinds of problems and handle them more effectively?
Well, let's talk about it, right? The risks are real. And I get asked that question quite a lot. And my answer is if you don't want it on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, then don't put it in AI. I don't care if you're an enterprise system or not. There's the risks are real. Like I was at a presentation last night and we were talking about OpenClaw, and they said, 25% of what's out there for OpenClaw is malicious. So, having that roadmap and understanding the steps that align with the risks of that organization and your willingness to take that on is really important. So I think the piece that is that prevents that for a retailer or consumer packaged good company is taking a full assessment of how risk adverse are you, and are you willing to have more risk or less risk? And then building a roadmap that helps you match that with the tools and reach a point where you evaluate. Just like any other tool, you want to see what the ROI is going to be. And so you might move faster with something that's a little bit riskier than if you're not getting the ROI that you want. I will openly say, and will still say this, and it's been out for a bit of time, I don't use OpenClaw. I don't care at this point if go buy a Mac Mini and I contain it. I'm not ready. And even as an AI practitioner, I just think there's too much risk. We don't know at this point how much risk is being taken every single day. And if there's injection things in there that can, get into your computer or add additional risk to you. And so there's plenty of other tools, out of the box solutions that have agents and that can do the functionality that my clients need without going that further step of OpenClaw. Claude just came out with their own version recently, like early April. There's a tool that I've loved for quite some time called Lindy AI that does agents. There's lots of tools at your disposal without going straight to OpenClaw, and that's a great example of how much risk is associated with that.
Yeah, and real quick, so one, I'm not sure I'm here. Are you saying open claw or open clawed?
OpenClaw.
Asking for a friend, let's say I don't know what that is. What is open claw? Just for anyone who's curious.
So it's an open source agent technology that people are creating agents to do things autonomously on their behalf. And there's a lot of risk associated with that when there's not a
Yeah.
human in the loop. If you're letting these agents go out and, search the web or make decisions on your behalf with your email or with the purchases, whatever the case may be, and it
Mhm.
skyrocketed and people started using it super fast, and there's not like we're pretty far behind in legislation when it comes to security around AI to begin with, and then you introduce something like OpenClaw, when there's other tools that are out there that are more safe, that contain the abilities, and you can turn things on and off, which you can put structure around your OpenClaw to make sure that it's not doing certain things. But for me, and my clients at this moment in time, which it's still rather new, it's the last couple months, it's too risky.
That totally makes sense. And I'm glad you explained that because they're definitely I know there's a lot of cautious consumers out there,
Mhm.
and I don't blame them for being cautious because there is even with, Grok, ChatGPT, OpenAI, Claude, all these different tools out there, um, there's still a lot of potential risk to them. And actually that's part of why I like to refer to them as force multipliers or power multipliers because that term is often used in a description of things like weapons and firearms, because that's really what it is if it's used with the right intention and carefully, it has some amazing results. But if the wrong person utilizes it for nefarious reasons, yeah, there's some really big risks that can come into it. That's part of why I'm a very big I love the concept of AI, but I like to always issue like a word of warning to
Mhm.
people whenever I'm talking about it. Like, hey, be careful with the data that you feed it. Like I don't know that I would ever put my personal like medical records in
Right.
to chat GPT. Um, and I'll tell an audience members now, don't do that. Not until we have, better regulations on data security and even just consumer privacy in relation to that. Just because there's a lot of unknowns with how
Right.
that data can be used.
Very true.
I'm really glad that you kind of covered all that. I did see actually a really cool note. So personally, I love a little bit of a culture moment, and I actually saw this little note here. So from that you completed McKinsey's Hispanic and Latino Executive Leadership Program,
Yes, several years ago.
and you spent your career developing leaders inside large organizations. You said one of the most fulfilling parts of your work is watching people grow beyond what they thought was possible. Again, kind of that multiplier again, getting people to do more than they ever thought they could achieve. How does AI change the leadership development conversation? Because I mean, we've talked all different aspects of business. um, I think now more and more like CEOs, CTOs, leadership positions are starting to really have these conversations more and more. If AI handles more analytical and operational work, what does it mean for skill leaders who need what skills do they need to develop moving forward? What does that look like?
I think moving forward, the people who will win in the future state have amazing interpersonal skills. And those that are incredible communicators can help with what we noted on earlier, the change management effect. Because the changes that we're seeing thus far right now are just scratching the surface. And what a leader will need in the future is to be an incredible communicator with both their human and digital workers, because org charts will look vastly different even a year from now. You will see the complement of digital workers embedded into standard org chart. So as I think through like the days in which led larger teams, I looked for balance where, Keenan offered this one particular skill set that Sarah didn't offer, that Mike didn't offer. And, what were the strengths of Mike versus Sarah? And how was I able to amplify the collective knowledge of all of them in a way that made my team successful? And so the same is here, where you're really thinking about organizational effectiveness. You're pairing that with your interpersonal skills and your communication skills, because being able to work with AI is that you're a great communicator. Like there are times where I literally take AI for a walk. We go for 45 minutes and we just start chatting, right? Those are the people that are the type that early on will become adopters of AI and find ways to continue to get the most out of AI. And so there's a lot of talk about the rise of the arts and how people who will be effective in the future are coming out with degrees that are more in that art realm versus that business realm. And what I love the most is, as a college student, you had to pick a discipline, right? Like, I'm going to go do this one thing and I'm going to be good at finance or business. Now you can come out and be like, I picked a discipline, but oh, by the way, I have a tool that allows me to do this function and this function and this function that, we didn't have when we were kids.
Yeah. I think it kind of harkens back to the old, I don't wanna say adage, but, like, the mindset of society where the technology that we have improves our productivity so much that we as a population can focus on the arts. We can pursue creativity and, communication and engagement with each other instead of having to, yeah, be working in the factory every single day. Like that's, the I think that's the thing of like the utopia of like the perfect human future where, yeah, we have a bunch of robots who kind of do all the busy work and we get the Star Trek future where we've solved the what is that called? The like the crisis of material where we have enough food. Everyone has a home. Like we are on the cusp of attaining kind of these kind of amazing opportunities for society.
I agree.
And I think that's actually like such a great note to kind of end on is that potential. So just to review then, the big thing for people, whether you're a business owner, whether you're working a small business, whether you are 60 years old, whether you're 16, is is generative AI and AI tools, they're here to stay. I mean, the that is the direction that these industries have gone. That is where our tech, Silicon Valley has focused in. Um, so it's not effective to just kind of ignore or push it to the side. It is how can we start to incorporate into our everyday lives? And it doesn't have to be, incorporating every decision that we make, but making sure that we're keeping up with it like any other tool or feature set. Would you say that's a pretty good summary?
That's fantastic.
Well, then, Sabrina, really, I want to thank you so much for jumping on and giving us your insight. I know there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of people who listen to this who are going to be really excited about this, the opportunity to really succeed. And so, I just really want to thank you for that as well. If you want to share, where can people find you? What are things that you're working on? Where can people find you on social media? What is the contact info?
So the best way to contact me is on LinkedIn. So it's just listed under Sabrina Valdez, and you can find me there. And then my website is thenextmoveconsulting.com. You can book your free AI strategy session and get started with, how can we work together from a discovery standpoint and see how we can implement AI. I really appreciate you having me on the show. It's been a blast to talk about all of my philosophies related to AI. And I hope this helps your audience see it as less intimidating and a way in which they can just get started. Because oftentimes the hardest part is getting from 0 to 1.
Absolutely. That is so much harder than getting to 10 or 100. It's just that very first step. So
Yes, absolutely.
thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you on the next one. Beyond the Register is sponsored by Genius, the modern point of sale system from Global Payments designed for retailers. Genius helps you reach your most important goals, whether that's simplifying your operations, tracking inventory, managing customer insights, or taking payments wherever your business takes you. To find out more, visit globalpayments.com/genius.